I need an omega on contract, or a beta. Whoever agrees. He said it like he was ordering cutlery, not a human being. I stared past the man who owned the sentence and into the window behind him, floor-to-ceiling glass that framed the city like a museum piece. The late afternoon light threw a pale gold across the office, touching everything except him. Hadrian Vale sat perfectly still, a monument in a charcoal suit. His desk could have been an altar, glossy wood, a single fountain pen, a leather folder, and a crystal bowl with nothing in it, because even his emptiness was curated. The office smelled faintly of cedar and old money, and my shoes made no sound on the Persian carpet. My heartbeat, on the other hand, sounded like a faulty drumline. "I'm not a rental tux," I said. I wrinkle. His eyes, cool, gray, measuring, lifted from the folder to my face. "You're Ezra Monroe. That's what my ID says." I folded my arms to keep them from shaking, not from him. From the numbers under my skin, the debt total chiseled into the back of my eyelids. The hospital bills stacking for my little brother like a paper grave. 29. Lecturer. Beta. His gaze flicked down, as if my file were written on my body. No bonded partner, no prior contracts. Stunning resume. Do I get a sticker? You'll get a check. He placed the leather folder in the center of the desk. Large enough to address your vulnerabilities. My vulnerabilities? I stepped closer to the glass desk and felt the office's cold seep into my sleeves. You mean the way banks reproduce like mold and hospitals charge by the breath? A pause, as if he were calculating the correct level of empathy to mimic. I mean the way a person can drown in other people's expectations. I wasn't prepared for the accuracy of that. My sarcasm tripped. I had to catch it before it fell. You practice that in the mirror or on live specimens? Both. He gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. I thought of Ben, my brother, who always pretended he liked hospital jello and always saved the red cups for me. Sit, Ezra. Sign, Ezra. Save him, Ezra. I sat. Hadrian opened the folder. The contract lay inside like an anatomy chart. Clauses labeled like arteries. Everything clean and clinical. It's a partnership, not a marriage, he said. Duration, 6 months, with the option to extend. Separate rooms, shared public appearances. You will accompany me to certain events. You will undergo a brief etiquette and media training course to reduce the risk of missteps. You just called me clumsy. I called you untrained. His tone didn't move. I require a partner for inheritance and governance optics. My family expects an omega. I am willing to accept a beta for a limited term. Generous. I let my hands rest on the tabletop. Up close, the surface reflected me. Thin face, tired eyes, hair that needed a barber and therapy. Why not hire an actor? I prefer honesty under contract to dishonesty for sport. His mouth made almost a smile. And your file indicates you are strongly motivated. Motivated. That was one way to say water was wet and fire burned. What would you need from me exactly? Presence. Discretion. A basic tolerance for my relatives. He capped the pen. Uncapped it again. I do not expect affection. A tiny beat. Nor do I offer it. My chest tightened in the way it always did when I thought of wanting something I couldn't have and punishing myself for wanting it. Clear terms. I like clear. Then, here are more. He slid a second sheet forward. Restrictions for safety. You will not attend certain venues without my approval. You will have a security detail when we are in public. You will not, under any circumstances, engage with press without my consent. Do I get a code name? I asked. Can it be Feral Library Assistant? The gray eyes didn't flicker. If you must. The corner of my mouth twitched before I remembered it shouldn't. And payment? Half up front. He placed a check on the folder. I didn't reach for it because my hands would betray me. The tremor, the heat climbing my neck, the humiliating burn of relief, the remainder in installments. Your brother's expenses can be routed directly to the hospital. The words hit harder than I expected. I'd come to sell my dignity with the detachment of a yard sale. He'd wrapped it in logistics and handed it back like charity with receipts. I heard myself say lightly, "You do read your specimens." I read outcomes, he corrected softly. And, I don't gamble. I do, I said. Or I wouldn't be here. Silence gathered like frost on the glass. He let me sit in it, as if he knew the silence would do more talking than he could. The city hummed below us, taxis and lives and sirens, Up here, all those noises were filtered into something abstract. What happens, I asked finally, if your family tests me? They will. He spoke like weather, inevitable. You'll pass. What if I don't? He leaned back in the chair. The movement was barely a movement, like a tide deciding to be generous. Then I assume the risk. You won't be harmed. By you, I thought. You didn't say by them. I traced the edge of the contract with the pad of my finger, and felt the paper give nothing back. Why me? Slipped out before pride could strangle it. You were recommended. He didn't offer, by whom. You have a spine. And you know how to keep your face when you're bleeding. I blinked. That's vivid. It's accurate. I considered asking if he had a spine under that suit, or if he'd traded it for another clause. Instead I asked, why not a real marriage? They still do that in your circles, right? White flowers, bored violinists, vows recited like business plans. My circles do many things badly, he said, and for the first time his voice moved, an infinitesimal crack that might have been humor or fatigue. I don't intend to copy them. The pen glinted between his fingers. He set it down, nudged it toward me. The gesture had all the warmth of a glacier shifting. Mr. Monroe. Ezra. You need me. I need you. We can pretend we don't, and write poetry about integrity. Or we can be honest and write checks. Wow, I said. You should embroider that on a pillow. He didn't laugh. Good. If he'd laughed, I might have had to trust him, and that felt dangerous. I picked up the pen. My hand settled. The tremor quieted, as if my body recognized the inevitability. This, too, was a choice, even if it came dressed up as the absence of better ones. I scanned the clauses one more time, hunting for traps. There were plenty, most of them social. When do I move in? I asked. Tomorrow. He tapped the folder. You'll receive a schedule by email. Wardrobe will be delivered to your apartment by 6. You'll keep your lecture schedule. I don't wish to interfere with your work. Thank you for not colonizing my syllabus. The joke landed between us like a paper airplane, and I watched it fail to fly. He stood. The chair made no sound. He extended a hand, I took it. His skin was cool, his grip precise, like the rest of him. For a fraction of a second, a current ran up my arm, heat and warning, and I chalked it up to adrenaline. Welcome, he said. My driver will take you home. You have a driver for bad decisions too, or is that a self-service department? Self-service, he said, and I couldn't tell if he was teasing me back or simply cataloging my flail into a data point. He walked me to the door. The corridor beyond was lined with portraits, Vale ancestors staring down their noses at the present. The house, the whole estate, rumor said, was older than any promise I'd ever kept. It smelled like wax, wood polish, and expectations. At the threshold, I paused. One last thing. He waited. If this is a partnership, I said, I want one clause added. Something like interest flickered. Name it. You don't get to talk about me like I'm a purchase order when we're alone. I lifted the pen a little. I will do what this requires, but I won't be. I searched for a word that didn't make me smaller for saying it. Itemized. A heartbeat. His jaw shifted a fraction, as if something less practiced wanted to move there. Clause accepted. And I want half up front now. I nodded toward the check. The truth was ugly and hungry. I don't think well on an empty bank account. He handed it over. No lecture. No raised brow, just paper and ink and survival with a signature line. The weight of it in my pocket loosened something between my ribs and tightened something else. Tomorrow, he said again. Tomorrow, I echoed, and walked out through generations of dark eyes that had never had to choose between dinner and rent. Outside the air felt warmer, as if my body had been holding its breath. In that room and only remembered oxygen when I hit the steps. The driver, older, watchful, opened the door of a black car with the same elegance Hadrian used to say vulnerabilities. I slid in, pressed my head back and let the city move. My phone lit with a new email, schedule attached, bullet pointed as if someone had put my future through a document shredder and reassembled it neatly. Another ping, the hospital portal, confirming a payment to Ben's account. I swallowed. I didn't cry. The car hummed. My pulse finally unclenched enough to make room for thought. I'd done it. Sold 6 months of my life for my brothers, because that math made sense, and because I'd always been good at making do. I pictured Hadrian behind his altar desk, pen aligned with the edge, emotions filed under N.A., I pictured the portraits watching, tallying whether I walked correctly, spoke correctly, breathed on cue. And because my brain is a petty raccoon rooting through emotional garbage, a sentence slunk up and perched on the dashboard of my mind, shiny and terrible and true. I just married an iceberg. Should have brought a thermos. The house had too many eyes. That was my first thought as I followed the driver through a corridor that seemed designed to intimidate intruders and spouses alike. Every 10 steps another portrait watched me, stern men with jawlines like chisels, women whose smiles looked imported from another century. I half expected the oil paint to whisper warnings as I passed. The smell of the place was older than me, polished oak, stone dust, a hint of something metallic, like history itself oxidizing. The ceilings were high enough to hold weather systems, the chandeliers too heavy to trust. If this was to be my home, I already knew it would never feel like mine. Your room, the driver said, opening a door on the second floor. It was a bedroom the size of my entire apartment. Canopied bed, neutral. Linens, a wardrobe that had more square footage than my kitchen. The window overlooked a manicured garden where nothing dared grow out of place. There was no personal touch, no human warmth, just elegance that had been vacuum sealed. I stood in the middle of the room, luggage at my feet, and said, "So this is marriage." The driver didn't laugh. He set my keycard on the desk, gave me a polite nod, and left. Dinner came at 7 sharp. I learned this because at 6:59, a maid appeared at my door like a phantom with impeccable timing. "Mr. Vale is waiting," she said, and then guided me to the dining hall. The table was long enough to seat 30. Tonight, it seated 2. Hadrian was already there, posture precise, a glass of red wine in his hand like an accessory. I sat across from him. The distance felt like a joke, 2 continents trying to negotiate across the Atlantic. We didn't talk. Forks clinked, knives slid across porcelain, and silence expanded until it pressed against my ears. Finally I tried, "So, nice house. You ever get lost in it?" "No," he said, without looking up. "Great. Glad we're keeping the mystery alive." His gaze lifted, cool as the wine he hadn't touched. "Don't ask questions, Ezra. It will be simpler." Simpler for whom, I wanted to ask, but my tongue preferred survival. Instead, I chewed steak, and thought about how contracts tasted better with ketchup. The schedule was delivered the next morning, printed, laminated, clipped to my door like scripture. Lecture hours at the college, commute, etiquette sessions, shared dinners, appearances marked in red. Even my weekends had bullet points. I traced the lines with my finger. So this is what it feels like to be a PowerPoint slide. The house obeyed the schedule as well. Staff moved with quiet precision. Meals arrived on time. My laundry disappeared and reappeared folded, as if handled by spirits. If not for the occasional glimpse of Hadrian gliding through the hallways, I could have believed I was the only living person inside. The first family dinner happened on a Sunday. I'd been warned, there will be guests, but I hadn't expected the table to fill like a courtroom. Brothers, cousins, an aunt or two. Every one of them dressed like their closets had direct access to Milan. Hadrian sat at the head. I sat at his right, where the spotlight felt uncomfortably deliberate. "This is your partner?" one of the uncles asked. The pause around partner long enough to host an opera. "Contractual partner," Hadrian corrected, his voice polite but final. The room hummed with distaste. "He's a beta," whispered someone farther down the table, as if the word itself were contagious. I took a sip of water. "Correct. I also teach college students how not to plagiarize essays. It's a glamorous life." The aunt across from me raised a brow. "Do you intend to stay long? Until the ink runs dry?" I smiled, sharp and thin. "Though if you have an opening for sarcastic commentary, I can extend my contract." A cousin actually choked on wine. The uncle looked scandalized. Hadrian's eyes flicked toward me, unreadable. The rest of the meal was a slow-motion autopsy. Questions came wrapped in courtesy but dripping with venom. Did I understand the weight of Vale tradition? Did I intend to embarrass them? Did I know how to behave in public? I answered each one with the grace of someone who'd spent years deflecting condescending administrators at faculty meetings. By dessert, I was fairly certain half the table wanted to strangle me with a linen napkin. Later, when the house had emptied of relatives and echoes, Hadrian found me in the hallway. He stood at the base of the stairs, shadow cutting across his face. "You shouldn't throw words like daggers," he said. "They asked if I planned to stay long," I replied. "I thought honesty was your brand." His jaw tightened. "Honesty, yes. Carelessness, no. Here, every word has a price." I leaned against the banister, arms crossed. So I'm already up for auction? His eyes narrowed, but he didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward his study, leaving me with the portraits staring down like they were tallying my debt. I exhaled through my teeth, the thought slipping in before I could stop it. So I'm not a partner. I'm inventory. A display item on the Vale family shelf. And the price tag hasn't even been written yet. The first time it happened, I blamed the stairs. 3 flights down to the kitchen, 2 back up to my room, and suddenly my pulse was galloping like I'd sprinted through a marathon I didn't remember entering. I pressed my palm to the wall and breathed in a slow count of 4, out for 6, like the stress therapist on YouTube insisted would turn me into a sentient cucumber. Nothing. My heart still hammered. Heat gathered in my cheeks, then dropped, leaving a chill under my skin. The house's old oak smell seemed louder, if smells could be loud, thick and resinous, threaded with something unfamiliar, something sweet. I shook it off. Maybe the HVAC was having an identity crisis. By the second time, at the end of my morning lecture, when my students' faces blurred for a moment as if I were looking at them through warm water, I stopped blaming architecture. I set the dry erase marker down, smiled like my skull wasn't buzzing, and dismissed the class 5 minutes early. A boy in the front row blinked at me, startled by the gift. I watched them file out, then braced my hands on the lectern until the world clicked back into focus. Sleep, I told myself. Food, less caffeine. You're not 21, you can't live off adrenaline and spite. At home, if I could call a museum with a mortgage home, I detoured into the library to hide from my own symptoms. The room had become a refuge. High shelves kissed the coffered ceiling, green-shaded lamps cast a soft pool of light on the long table, a gas fire held a steady civilized flame. Books lived here like well-behaved citizens, leather spines, guiltless. Margins, the quiet promise of answers I didn't know I was asking. I pulled a history volume and pretended to read, but my eyes wouldn't sit still. Words slid. My heartbeat ran up and down a ladder. My skin felt too tight. And then the strange sweetness again, closer, stacked over the cedar and paper, as if the room itself had warmed at the edges. I blinked. Hadrian stood in the doorway. He must have come in silently. He did most things as if sound owed him rent. He didn't speak. He regarded me for a beat longer than a courtesy glance. Too intent to be a mistake. Too unreadable to be reassurance. You've changed, he said. I barked a laugh I didn't feel. New socks. He didn't return the volley. Your color, he said. Your breathing. Observant, I said, because I couldn't say I feel like a radio picking up a station no one tuned to. It's been a week of schedules. Maybe my body is protesting bullet points. Sit, he said, which would have sounded like an order from anyone else. From him, it sounded like gravity. The room obeyed. I sank into the leather chair, as if it knew me better than I did. He crossed the room and reached past me to adjust the lamp, lowering the light. The air shifted when he moved. Clean cologne, cold metal, and something restrained, as if even his scent had agreed to dress in a suit. My skin prickled. I'm fine, I added, preempting concern and inspection both. Just tired. Eat, he said. Then sleep. He was halfway to the door when the warmth won. My eyes snagged, then slid. The book blurred. I let my forehead fall onto the crook of my arm for a second that turned into many footsteps. A soft sound, the rustle of cloth, and then a weight settled over my shoulders, wool, thin and expensive, warmed by someone else's hands. A blanket. No, his suit jacket. I didn't move. I let the gesture exist without picking it apart, the way you don't touch a soap bubble if you want it to live. I fell asleep to the sound of the fire pretending to be a heartbeat. And when I woke, the jacket didn't smell like his cologne anymore. It smelled like something I couldn't place. Something not mine, not his, something new. The next day, at the faculty office, Claire leaned into my doorway with her habitual mug and a look of scandalized curiosity. Is this a trick? She asked. I blinked at my email until the words arranged themselves into format instead of fog. What? You smell different. What? I laughed, too loud. Is that a new form of harassment training we got? Professor Sniff checks? She rolled her eyes. Relax. I mean, you're wearing new cologne? It's nice, it's faint, but... She waved her hand in a halo around her head, searching. Sort of warm and citrusy, or, I don't know, something. Within the space of her sentence, my pulse spiked. A jump rope. The office was suddenly too small, the fluorescent lights a crime. It's probably the laundry detergent at home, I said. The word home made my tongue taste of dust. They use alien technology. Send me the brand. She sniffed again, unabashed. Seriously though, if this is a midlife crisis, it's working. I'm 29, I said weakly. Then it's a pre-midlife crisis. We should market that. She grinned. See you at the department meeting, Dr. Monroe. When she left, I pressed my palm to the desk and counted my breaths until the room stepped back from me. The sweetness in the air returned like a ghost, and with it a tightness in my chest, a thread drawn a little too snug. I splashed water on my face in the bathroom and studied my reflection. I looked like me. I felt like a radio again, tuned between stations, static and melody tangled. Hadrian didn't comment that evening when I arrived at 7 with a storm under my skin. He said very little at dinner, but his gaze touched my face and hands in a way that felt like reading, rather than looking. When the meal ended, he set down his napkin precisely on the plate. Tomorrow, he said. We have a reception at the Stanton Gallery, 7:30. It will be crowded. You will stay near me. I bristled on principle. I wasn't planning to crowd surf solo. His mouth almost moved. Good. The schedule gods who love irony ensured that the following night my body chose chaos. The Stanton reception was all glass and red velvet, a chandelier like a frozen rainstorm, waiters carrying champagne like they were distributing permission slips to bad decisions. People looked expensive and bored, the way people do when they've run out of new ways to buy themselves interest. I kept to Hadrian's side, our elbows never quite meeting, a choreography we were still learning. My skin hummed. The sweetness, God, there it was again, gathered in the back of my throat, dizzy and bright, as if someone had uncorked a bottle of summer in winter air. A man approached us out of the crowd with the self-esteem of a yacht. Tall. Polished. Alpha, my bones said before my brain did, though I didn't know how I knew that word as a sensation. His smile had teeth. Hadrian, he said, as if tasting it. Finally decided to accessorize? Every muscle in my shoulders tightened. I smiled politely, deploying the faculty meeting face. Hi, I'm Ezra, contracted human. His eyes slid to me. Not a glance. A pass. Charming. He stepped closer, too close. Inhaled as if scent were a handshake. Something in me flared, hot and embarrassed. My pulse tried to escape through my teeth. Step back, Hadrian said. And the temperature of the word froze the air by 2 degrees. The man blinked, then laughed, leaning in again, friendly like a wolf. Relax, just curious. Another sniff, a small violating sound. Smells interesting. Everything in me recoiled. The sweetness sharpened. The room tilted, then snapped flat, and in that whiplash of clarity I felt Hadrian's presence shift. No visible change. But the space around him tightened, occupied by something that didn't allow trespass. Back, he repeated, lower. And the word carried steel. Now. The man's smile thinned. Since when do you guard betas like crown jewels? Hadrian's hand landed, light but real, at the small of my back, a point of contact that felt like someone had flung a rope across a chasm. Since now, a beat, a calculation. The man raised his hands in mock surrender and retreated into the glittering crowd, leaving the scent of expensive whiskey and a lesson. My lungs remembered their job in a noisy rush. I realized I was shaking and hid it by smoothing my jacket. That was fun, I said. Can we do it again, but with more humiliation? Hadrian didn't look at me. He scanned the room like a radar, cataloging possibilities. We're leaving. We just got here. You're pale, he said. I'm always pale. It's a brand. He didn't argue. He simply moved, and the crowd opened, a tone of voice without words, a pressure change. Outside the night tasted clean. A line of cars idled like obedient animals. The driver appeared, a silent miracle, and the door closed us into the leather quiet. We didn't speak for the first 2 blocks. The city slid around us, neon, wet pavement, the human hum. My heart calmed as if it recognized the rhythm. When I could trust my voice not to squeak, I said, "Thank you." "You don't owe me thanks," he said. "You owe yourself safety. Those are not mutually exclusive." I exhaled. What did he mean, about smelling interesting? Hadrian's profile could have been carved from civility. You tell me. I don't wear cologne. I swallowed. Unless the laundry detergent counts. Laundry detergent does not make alphas turn predatory. For a second, fatigue or frustration ghosted across his face, there and gone. We'll have the family physician stop by. A bolt of panic sewed my shoulder blades together. I don't need, you do. His voice softened half a degree. You're not, well, I sifted through words and found the truth I didn't want. Not myself. That got his eyes on me. They were gray again, but not cold. Ezra, he said, like he was saying my name to see if it fit a question. You will not go anywhere alone for the next few days. I'm not your property. You're under my protection, he said, and the distinction hit me in two places at once, pride and relief. The car carried us through the city's arteries, and into the silent roads that led home. He walked me inside, not touching, but close enough that I felt the orbit of him. At my door, he paused. Sleep, he said. Bossy, I muttered. Correct, he said, and left me to the portraits and the hush. In my room, I leaned against the closed door, and let the afterimages play under my lids, the man's intrusive inhalation. The way my body had reacted like a diagram I hadn't studied. Hadrian's voice dropping a floor when he said back. I showered long and hot, hoping steam could dissolve strangeness. Wrapped in a towel, I caught my reflection again. Same eyes. Same mouth. Same old bones. But my body didn't feel like a container anymore. It felt like a radio. Something was broadcasting. I couldn't turn it off. I didn't know how I'd tuned in. I slid into bed and stared at the dark. The house breathed. Somewhere down the hall, a clock made a small civil tick. Under the blankets, the ghost of that sweetness clung to my skin, new, bright, undeniable. I told the ceiling, I'm a beta. My pulse answered, louder, disobedient. Then, softer to the dark, the question that had been stalking me since the library, or am I? The family physician arrived at 9 sharp, which told me 2 things. Hadrian had called before dawn, and worry wore a bespoke suit in this house. Dr. Mireille Sato carried her competence the way some women carry pearls, quietly, expensively, relentlessly. She was small, brisk and unbothered by the portraits glaring down at her as she set a leather bag on the edge of my bed. Her perfume was subtle and clean, the olfactory equivalent of a well-edited paragraph. Mr. Monroe, she said, already slipping a cuff around my arm. Breathe normally. Define normally, I said, because humor is my last working organ. Her eyes flicked up. In for 4, out for 6, we'll fake it together. I obeyed. The cuff tightened. Released. She touched my wrist, my throat, the back of my hand. Her fingers were cool. I felt overheated by comparison, as if someone had installed a small sun under my ribs and then forgotten to leave the instruction manual. Hadrian stood at the window, posture clear as a command. He didn't speak. He watched. Dr. Sato's questions landed like clean needles. Headaches? Dizziness? Changes in appetite, mood, sleep? I tried to answer with dignity, and failed with honesty. Yes. Yes. Yes to everything, and to something else I didn't have words for. Something syrupy in the air that made my blood move differently. She listened to my chest. Heart's fast, she murmured. But, regular. Then, she lifted my chin with 2 fingers and looked at my pupils. And your scent has shifted. Everyone's very invested in my smell this week, I muttered. Should I start a newsletter? The smallest tug at her mouth said she had met patients like me before. She sat back on the chair, laced her fingers, and glanced once at Hadrian. He didn't move, but the room moved around him the way weather moves around a mountain. All right, Dr. Sato said, turning back to me. The short version is this. You're a latent omega. The word rearranged the furniture in my head. I felt my mouth make a shape I didn't recognize. No, I said. I'm a beta. I've always been latent, she repeated, gently but not negotiably. Suppressed. It happens, especially in households that favor uniformity over biology. Something old and sharp flicked awake at the base of my skull. Suppressed how? Medication in childhood, she said. Behavioral frameworks. Scent-neutralizing regimens. Sometimes it's cultural pressure. Sometimes it's ignorance dressed up as love. She tilted her head. Did you take daily pills growing up? For focus? For mood? The room contracted. I saw our kitchen, laminate table, lemon cleaner, my mother's neat handwriting on. A weekly pill organizer. Monday through Sunday like a promise you couldn't break. For school, she'd said, smiling too wide. You're calmer on them. Better at listening. Yes, I said. My voice felt far away. They were for Attention. Dr. Sato nodded, as if we'd arrived at a known address. They can blunt early secondaries. Not always. Often enough to be a pattern. She glanced again, past me. And the contract mark you took recently. The ring, I said reflexively, then realized I was touching it, the slim band on my finger that had meant money first and optics second. It had been warm for days, as if it remembered a fire I hadn't stood near. It's a formal bond, she said. Parafamilial. Such marks can act as a catalyst in latents. Unlock what was pharmacologically or behaviorally dampened. Think of it as an old radio picking up a frequency it was designed to hear. The metaphor bit. I hated it for being right. I looked at Hadrian then, because the word bond had caught on something between us. His hands were folded behind his back, the line of his shoulders had hardened. He was listening the way he did everything, completely, and at a remove. So you're telling me, I said, turning back to Dr. Sato, that someone flipped a switch and now my body is what? Broadcasting? Adjusting, she corrected. You're running warm, your endocrine profile is shifting, and your pheromones are presenting. None of this is a moral statement, it's biology. Her gaze, when it met mine, was steady enough to stand on. You're not broken. You were bent to fit a shape, now you're unbending. Heat climbed my throat. It felt like shame, until I noticed the anger braided through it. I'm not a device, I said, and heard the snap in my voice. I'm not a thing to be activated. You're a person, she said simply, which is why you need information, rest, hydration, and boundaries. She rose, already making a list. Avoid crowded events, keep a trusted companion nearby in public, don't indulge anyone who treats you like a scent to investigate. Her eyes cut briefly to Hadrian at that, and something like iron hummed in the room. I'll send a supplement protocol, she continued. Nothing heavy, just support while your system stabilizes. If anything escalates, fever, vertigo, panic, you call me, not the house, me. I swallowed. Thank you. Don't thank me for naming what you already felt. She squeezed my shoulder, cool hand, steady pressure, and was gone with the same efficient quiet she'd brought with her. The door clicked. The portraits resumed their silent opinions. I stared at the pattern on the duvet until it stopped moving. I'm not, I began, and stopped. Property, Hadrian said, as if finishing a sentence I hadn't spoken aloud. I looked up, sharp. He'd left the window and come to the foot of the bed. The gray of his eyes had darkened, a storm inching closer to shore. You will not go anywhere alone, he said. Not an order, an announcement made to the air that expected obedience. Not for the next few weeks. My hackles rose like a badly trained cat's. Try that again, but with less medieval. I won't allow other alphas to approach you. Won't allow. I sat up, blanket pooling at my waist. A fresh wave of heat skated my skin, unhelpfully dramatic. Do you hear yourself? You're not my jailer, he supplied, mouth flat. No. I am not. You're acting like one. I am acting like someone who recognizes a change in risk. Risk to whom? I demanded. To your family optics? Or to your property line? The word tasted ugly. I threw it anyway. His jaw flexed. To you. Silence hit a wall and bounced. We stood in it. Two stubborn men with too many words between them and not enough practice at the right ones. I slid off the bed too fast. The floor rose under my feet, then steadied. The heat in my veins pulsed, a drum that didn't care about decorum. I can take care of myself. Can you? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. In a room of men like the one last night, with your system waking and your scent unshielded? His hands opened, empty. You are not weak. You are unguarded. I won't be caged, I said, breath catching on the edge of fury and something traitorously close to fear. I spent my childhood being medicated into acceptable. I will not spend my adulthood being escorted into invisible. Something in his expression shifted. The weather over the mountain broke. No cages, he said, softer. Guardrails. Temporary. I laughed, a short bright crack in the air. Guardrails? Listen to you. You're a very expensive guard dog in a very expensive suit. The corner of his mouth almost remembered how to smile. If that helps you comply, call me whatever you like. It won't help, I said. But the heat under my skin flickered at the edges, as if humor had tricked it into blinking. He moved a fraction closer, then stopped like a man trained not to spook horses. Ezra. I hated that my name sounded safer in his mouth. What? You were told a story about yourself, he said. You're allowed to be angry at the ending. You're not allowed to set yourself on fire to fix it. I stared at him. The portraits receded. The room got smaller in a good way, like a theater narrowing the light to a stage. Fine, I said, because compromise is a form of survival. No crowded events, texts if I leave a room. I choose the trusted companion when it isn't you. I approve the choice, he said. Of course you do, I muttered, and the heat rolled again, stronger, like a tide deciding to be a wave. It hit without warning. One breath I was upright and righteous, the next I was a candle too close to its own flame. The sweetness in the air swelled until it coated my tongue. My knees went loose. Hadrian moved before gravity finished the thought. One hand at my elbow, firm and impersonal, the other hovering as if to catch without trapping. Sit, he said, already guiding me. I sat, my pulse raced, my skin prickled. It felt like the world had been turned up a notch, brightness and sound and scent crowding each other for space under my skin. Panic clawed once, what if this never stops? And then receded under the pressure of his palm steady at my shoulder. Breathe, he said. In for 4, out for 6. You paid her to say that, I managed. I paid attention, he said, and if I hadn't been busy negotiating with oxygen, I might have accused him of tenderness. The sweetness spiked again. I flinched. He swore, quietly, viciously, words I suspected he didn't use in front of his ancestors. You can't stay in this hallway, he said. Another assessment spun behind his eyes. My room. Now. I barked a laugh that sounded more like a cough. Forward, Mr. Vale. His glance promised a later argument. You'll survive the scandal. He kept a hand on me as we moved, not holding, not dragging, just there, a point on a map that wouldn't reposition if I swayed. We passed the portraits. I would have sworn their painted noses tilted higher at the impropriety. The house's smell changed as we crossed thresholds, wax, cedar, stone, and under it, unmistakably, me. Hadrian's door opened to a room that looked exactly like him, spare, immaculate, too controlled to be comfortable. He steered me to a chair by the window, then crossed to a cabinet and retrieved a chilled bottle and a glass. He pressed the glass into my hands. Drink. The water tasted like an apology. I swallowed, again and again, until the heat in my throat slackened. He cracked the window an inch. Cold air stitched itself to my skin, cooling the edges. I'm fine, I said, when the world had saturated back to manageable. Define fine as, not actively combusting. He didn't sit. He stood between me and the door like a polite barricade. You are staying here, he said, where I can control the environment. Control, I echoed, half exhausted, half needling. Your favorite verb. My favorite result, he said. His gaze swept my face and came back less steel. You can be angry at me tomorrow. I can be angry at you now, I said. But the words were soft, and the chair felt like an anchor. The sweetness my scent, my treacherous, waking body's announcement still threaded the air, but it no longer owned the room. The window's cold diluted it, the water thinned it, his presence kept it from becoming a target painted on my skin. I leaned my head back and stared at the ceiling. I hate this. I know, he said. I hate that you're right. I prefer correct, he said, and I snorted despite myself. Outside the window, the garden lay disciplined and quiet. Inside the room, the silence turned companionable by degrees I refused, on principle, to acknowledge. I curled my fingers around the glass until they stopped shaking. Guardrails, I said, eyes closed. Temporary, he answered. The heat inside me sank a little deeper, less blaze than ember. I breathed. The night moved. And under everything, a new sentence formed. Stubborn, uneasy, inevitable, something in me has changed. And he knows it too. By the third week, dinner stopped feeling like a courtroom and started feeling like a very formal truce. We still sat at opposite poles of the long table, but the air between us wasn't an ice field anymore. It was a stretch of water we could shout across without freezing. How was the lecture? Hadrian asked one Tuesday, as if we'd been asking each other things for years. Better than the department meeting. Fewer people tried to kill me with a smile. I buttered bread with the focus of a monk. We discussed plagiarism, the oldest romance. Student meets essay, steals heart and body, calls it inspiration. Punishments? Creative. I took a bite, chewed. One has to suffer for art. My students will suffer for the lack of it. The corner of his mouth tilted, almost laughter like a barometric shift. Your schedule looks crowded this week. It's almost as if someone stapled my life to a spreadsheet. I prefer clips to staples, he said, solemn as a tomb, and I snorted into my water. We argued cheerfully about trivial things, whether the garden hedges were too precise to be called living, whether soup counted as a meal or a beverage with ambitions. Once the roast was over-salted, and he actually apologized to the chef and then to me, as if he'd personally mined the salt. Another night, I told him the chandelier looked like it wanted to murder us in our sleep. He glanced up, assessed the hanging crystals and said, "I admire your paranoia. It keeps our insurance premiums honest." It wasn't love. It wasn't even trust. But it was conversation. And my bones thawed to it. The next Sunday the family descended again, perfumed and sharp, a murmuring hive that mistook pedigree for personality. I'd prepped myself for a new round of specimen poking, and came armed with sarcasm. What I hadn't prepped for was the particular cousin who slid into the chair beside me, with the oily charm of a salesman who sold yachts to people who didn't like water. "Ezra, is it?" he said, making my name sound like a product. "I'm Caius. We haven't had the pleasure." "I'm not sure pleasure is on the menu," I said. "But hello." He leaned in, making a show of including me. "We were just discussing the charitable foundation. Of course, you wouldn't be familiar with the details." "I can read," I said pleasantly. "Big words even." A few smiles cracked around the table, the covert kind, the ones shared by servants who knew where the real power lived. Caius's own smile didn't shift. He inhaled, too near, a small ravenous sound I recognize now the way you recognize thunder after lightning. "You're quite present," he said. "For a beta?" My skin crawled. "I've been accused of worse." "Hadrian," Caius called down the table, voice syruped with kinship. "Your contract is very lively, quite a scent." "Caius," Hadrian said, without looking up. "Try a salad. You might discover restraint." Laughter pricked around us like hail. Caius's cheeks went a flattering shade of irritated. He turned back to me, his voice a pivot. "Tell me honestly, Ezra, do you ever worry you're not equipped for this world?" "You mean a world where people whisper over soup?" I asked. I picked up my napkin, folded it once, set it down like a question. "I've taught freshman composition at 8 a.m. on Mondays for 6 years. I have survived worse worlds than this." Aunt Velda coughed something that might have been a laugh into her water. The uncle who hated me looked personally offended by my oxygen consumption. Caius leaned closer, persistence masquerading as curiosity. "It must be awkward, playing a role that demands an omega's qualities." My hand tightened on the fork, the metal finding bone. Before I could decide whether to remove his eyebrows verbally, Hadrian looked up. Not at Caius, at me. It felt like a wire was pulled taut between us. "Caius," he said, tone sliding from weather to weather advisory. "Enough." "Oh come now," Caius purred, fearless in the way men are when they believe they're protected by blood and expensive shoes. "We're family." "Exactly," Hadrian said. "Behave like it." "Are we redefining behave?" I murmured, and a few chairs down someone dropped a fork. Caius smiled with all his teeth. "No offense meant. Contracts are practical, efficient. But one does wonder what you'll do when you need the real thing." He didn't say the word. He didn't have to. It hung above the table like a chandelier threat, Omega. My pulse kicked. The room sharpened around the edges. I felt a very stupid, very brave impulse rise in me on the back of the anger I'd swallowed since childhood. "Don't worry," I said softly. "If I need something real, I'll tell the grown-ups." Silence. Then a few escapee laughs, quick and scandalized. Caius blinked, recalibrating disrespect. He opened his mouth to retaliate, but Hadrian set his glass down with a sound that could have sliced a ribbon. The table obeyed the noise like a leash. "We're finished," he said to the room, but the words landed on Caius. "Thank you for coming." It was not a suggestion. Chairs scraped. People who'd worked very hard not to be told what to do, suddenly remembered appointments in other neighborhoods. Caius stood last, fury polishing his manners to a dangerous shine. He inclined his head to me with a bow so shallow it mocked itself. "Charmed," he said. "Overruled," I said. He walked out, taking his cologne and his insinuations with him. When the echoes faded, I slumped back, adrenaline sapping the cartilage from my bones. "Put that on a pillow," I said to the empty end of the table. "Behave like family." Hadrian's mouth did its almost smile. "I'll have embroidery start tomorrow." We ate dessert in a quiet that felt like a blanket rather than a coffin. The chocolate was excellent. The company was, God help me, Acceptable. Later, in the hall outside the dining room, we slowed in the same breath. And turned toward each other like two magnets tired of pretending. The portraits, indifferent to human progress, didn't blink. You didn't have to rescue me, I said. Technically, he said. I rescued Caius. From me? I arched a brow. From himself. He studied me the way he studied contracts, searching for the clause that revealed meaning. You were shaking. I was angry, I corrected. Then sighed. And angry. His gaze slid to my hands, specifically to the way I had them balled at my sides. He didn't touch. He didn't have to. Walk, he said. Outside. The garden path was gravel and discipline. The night smelled like green things, remembering they were alive. The air helped. So did the distance from the dining room's politics. You think you can buy solutions, I said finally, kicking a stone that had the gall to be in my way. You write checks at problems until they stop making noise. That works for buildings and lawyers. People don't work like that. I don't buy people, he said, evenly. You rent their proximity, I said, gesturing between us. You call it contract, which is honest. I'll give you that. But you still expect the neat outcome money usually gets you. He took the criticism without deflecting, which was more disarming than defense. What outcome do you think I expect? That I'll behave, I said. That I'll be reasonable and thankful and easy to place on a calendar. That I'll be grateful for guardrails. The crunch of our shoes filled 3 heartbeats. I expect you to be Ezra, he said. So simply it undid me. I am adjusting to what that means. Dangerous sentence, I muttered. Correct, he said. We reached the fountain, classical, smug, and paused. My pulse had slowed, but my skin hummed with that now familiar undercurrent, the way a wire hums when current moves through it. The sweetness was back, the scent I had grown to resent as if it were a billboard I hadn't ordered. I rubbed at my forearms. It's getting worse. I know. He glanced around, assessing benches, sightlines, angles like they were variables in a math problem. Then, softly, may I? It took a beat to understand he was asking permission to do something I didn't have words for. I nodded. He shrugged out of his coat, and draped it over my shoulders like a curtain. The fabric held cold air and the faintest trace of his soap. Then he produced from some pocket dimension, a square of linen. Yes, of course he carried linen. And handed it to me. Dampen this, he said, moving to the fountain. He dipped another cloth, wrung it with quick competence, and offered it open-palmed. What am I, a soufflé? I tried to joke, but the tremor in my voice ruined the bake. He guided my hand, gently, physician slow, pressing the cool cloth to the skin under my jaw, the inside of my wrists, the pulse points that felt like alarm bells. Skin cooling reduces diffusion, he said, as if lecturing on weather. Fresh air helps. And what helps with the humiliation? I asked, because if I didn't aim at humor, I'd aim at panic. Humiliation is optional, he said. Embarrassment is a habit. Try not to practice. You're very bad at pep talks. I'm excellent at outcomes, he said, deadpan. And I laughed despite myself. The sound seemed to startle the hedges. We stood there an indeterminate number of minutes, me breathing, him being a windbreak. No touching beyond the practical, no words that pretended to be smaller than they were. The sweetness receded from the edges inward, like a tide admitting limits. My shoulders dropped from around my ears. Better? He asked. Marginally less like an air freshener commercial. I handed the cloth back, heat flushing less at my skin, and more at the whole situation. Thank you. He took the cloth, folded it away into order. You don't need to thank me for looking after what's mine to be responsible for. Careful, I said. That sounded dangerously close to care. He met my eyes. It is. I blinked. The night did an internal rearrangement. The fountain pretended it hadn't heard. We walked back slowly, the kind of pace people use when they don't want to arrive at the thing they'll have to say next. At the steps, I found my voice first. Guardrails, I said. Temporary, he agreed. And I choose my companions when it isn't you. I approve the choice, he said, with the same infuriating calm, but his mouth softened. Around it like he knew we were performing lines we'd both rehearsed too often. Inside the house swallowed us again. Wax, cedar, stone, and beneath it, the bearable version of me. We paused at my door. He didn't touch. The space between us felt measured and somehow generous. Good night, Ezra. Good night, Hadrian. I tilted my head. Thank you for being A very expensive guard dog in a very expensive suit. Finally, he said, deadpan, appropriate branding. I shut the door on a laugh I didn't intend to keep. Alone, I leaned against the wood and let the night replay. Caius's oily knife smile, the family's soft knives, the garden cool on my skin, the coat on my shoulders, the way Hadrian's presence had been an answer without asking. An awful, traitorous sentence crawled up and stretched on the couch of my mind, smug as a cat. I'm starting to trust this iceberg. God. Someone kill me. The calendar did the cruelest thing it knows how to do, it kept going. Days ticked past like beads on a string. Quiet, inevitable, and each one closer to the knot. The contract had an end date. We'd both signed it with professional hands and personal fictions. 6 months sounded like a forever you could see across when we started. Now it was a living room you could cross in 8 steps. Everyone felt it. The staff went softer around the edges, as if sound might break something. The portraits, treacherous as always, looked pleased. Endings are a favorite hobby of the dead. Even the garden seemed to stand straighter, hedges trimmed to funeral neatness. I counted breaths the way Dr. Sato taught me. I drank water like it was a belief. I went to work and pretended to care about comma splices. And in between, the house staged little ambushes, a coat draped over the back of a chair that still remembered my shoulders, the shape of his mouth. Around Ezra, the way he'd begun to pour me tea without asking, as if some unseen algorithm had absorbed my preferences and made them his. Then the call came. The hospital number. My throat narrowed. I answered in the empty vestibule like a man answering a verdict. Mr. Monroe? I'm calling about Benjamin. I didn't breathe for the length of his name. Yes? His labs are stable. We've scheduled discharge for Friday morning. I said something that was probably gratitude, and probably a sound only dogs could hear. When the call ended, I sat on the bottom stair and covered my eyes with my hands. For a minute the world was just heartbeat and wood polish, and 4 words. He's coming home, he's... Ezra? I looked up. Hadrian stood 2 steps above me, as if he'd descended until gravity suggested he stop. He'd loosened his tie, evidence of an emergency I doubted he'd admit to. Good news? He asked carefully. I nodded. They're releasing Ben. Something moved through his face. Quick, contained, gone. I'll have the car brought round. We'll pick him up. I shook my head. I'll go alone. He'll be nervous. You're not... A breath. The old argument touched down and hovered. We both saw it and chose not to feed it. All right, he said. Tell me what he'll need here. Room that doesn't smell like old money, I said. And blankets. And quiet. And bad movies. Done, he said, like I'd asked for a paperclip. Tell him the kitchen can do pancakes at any hour. He'll think he died and went to IHOP, I said, and the smallest smile cracked my jaw. Friday arrived dressed as Grace. The nurse packed Ben's things with the brisk compassion of people who get paid in thank yous. He stepped into the hallway wearing the hoodie I bought him in a thrift store on. A day we'd had $5 between us, and smiled like he was trying on light. Hey Z, he said, voice hoarse with relief. Can we stop for fries? We can stop for a potato truck, I said, and then my vision went bright and blurry and I made a noise I won't repeat in any court of law. He hugged me and smelled like hospital soap and my whole life. We drove through a city that suddenly looked like someplace you could survive. Ben leaned his head against the window, narrating small things like gifts, a dog in a sweater, a woman laughing into her phone, a billboard that misprinted sale as soul and accidentally told the truth. At the house, the staff did what they do best, appeared without fanfare and did everything. Ben's room had been softened into comfort. Blue-gray walls, fresh sheets, a stack of blankets in reckless colors. On the nightstand, a tray, juice, crackers, a little card with the kitchen number handwritten on it. He touched the blankets like they were shy animals. Z, he whispered. It's nice. It's temporary, I said, because if I named it home, I'd have to learn another way to breathe. Just until you're steadier. He nodded, already drifting. I tucked the blanket closer to his chin. It felt like winning something we hadn't known the name of. When I stepped into the hall, Hadrian was there, not too near, holding 2 mugs. He offered me one. Chamomile. No question asked. No answer required. He okay? He asked. I swallowed. Yeah. We stood like that. Cups warming our hands, and the quiet between us did not feel like ice or even truce. It felt like a room the house had been hiding from us since we moved in. Later, when Ben slept, I went to my room and took the suitcase down from the closet shelf. I didn't plan the timing like a Hollywood exit. The contract was 3 days from finished. This was choreography, more than drama. Fold. Stack. Zip. The sounds were small and decisive, and each one landed like a footstep on a bridge back to myself. I moved through the familiar ritual. Charger, toiletries, the hoodie. That doesn't match anything. And found the ring on the nightstand. I spun it once with my thumb. The simple band had warmed to me over months. It had called my body into the truth of itself, and called this house into something I couldn't name. I slipped it into the pocket of my jeans like it might burn if I left it out. A knock. Not the staff discreet tap. Come in, I said. Because pretending I could avoid this would have been cowardice, and I'm tired of being afraid of the wrong things. He stepped in, and saw the suitcase. You could watch him choose where to put the emotion. He put it in his shoulders, set them straighter, like posture could bargain with physics. So, he said. So, I echoed. He closed the door behind him, as if the portraits didn't deserve this scene. You're leaving? In 3 days, I said. Like we agreed. His gaze flicked to the ring bulge in my pocket. Too honest to pretend he didn't know where it was. You were going to go without speaking to me? I was going to go without making it a Greek tragedy. I forced a shrug. You're good at exits, Hadrian. I was trying it on. Silence. The kind that chooses knives over words. You're running, he said finally. He made it sound like a diagnosis, not an accusation. I lifted my chin. I'm leaving. From what? His voice didn't rise. It darkened. From me? From this house? From yourself? From a contract, I said. From an arrangement that did what it was supposed to do. It paid for my brother's life. It paid for mine to be paused long enough to restart. His mouth twitched, not amusement. And you pretend that's the whole sum? I don't, I said, and heard the crack in my own voice. I know what else happened. I know I changed here. I know you. I exhaled. I know I trusted you. But that was inside a cage with velvet bars. His eyes flinched, barely. I asked for guardrails. You built guardrails, I said. You live inside them. I didn't know I did too until I liked it. What is it you want, he asked, that you can't have here? My life back, I said. But not the one I had. The one that keeps the parts of me I met in your hallways and puts them in my own rooms. He took a breath that rearranged the air. You think I would take that from you? I think you don't know how not to control a thing you care about, I said. I think you would try to be gentle while you did it. I think I would let you. We stood on opposite sides of the suitcase like two nations proposing different kinds of peace. I don't want to let you, I said quietly. I want to choose. Something broke, softly, like silk, not glass. He stepped closer, 1 pace, 2, enough that I could count the flecks in his eyes. Then choose, he said. But don't lie about the arithmetic. What arithmetic? That we are not a transaction anymore. His voice kept very steady, as if the steadiness was the only thing keeping him from falling. You are not a contract. I want you. He paused, and the pause was a life raft thrown and refused. Not on paper. The room tipped. My heart did something ill-advised. I made my mouth move. Say it in a language that isn't yours. He blinked. I love you, he said. The simplest sentence he had ever said. It hit me like weather, and like a door opening, and like the first step off a roof. My hand found the edge of the suitcase to hold on to. The portraits, should they have peered through the door crack, would have enjoyed it immensely. You don't know me enough, I said. It was the last argument I had, and it was thin. I know you're braver than you think and more careful than you pretend, he said, too quickly for rehearsal. I know you ration your anger, and spend your jokes freely. I know you save the red jello for your brother, and the last piece of bread for whoever sits to your left. I know you call humiliation optional and practice, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you forget how to practice it. Stop, I said, because my eyes were leaking and I didn't authorize it. No, he said. I laughed, and it broke like something freeing itself. I wiped my face with the heel of my hand. You make a very persuasive case study, Mr. Vale. I make promises, he said, when I intend to keep them. And what do? I asked the room, the suitcase, the soft ache in my chest. Run? Stay? Turn into a myth about the one who got away and the one who kept the house cold? You do the thing you came here to learn, he said. You choose. Time stretched. I could feel my life the way you can feel a storm. Pressure and possibility. The past me, desperate and small, tugged at my sleeves. The new me, sore and awake, lifted my chin. I'm not leaving to punish you, I said. I'm leaving because I want to see who I am when no one is measuring me. Not even you. I zipped the suitcase halfway, then stopped. But I'm not gone. Not in the way that means never. He closed his eyes once. When he opened them, the gray had gone very clear. I'll wait, he said. Not as a strategy, as a fact. Don't, I said. Because I'm cruel when I'm kind. Live, if we meet there. I gestured at the air, a future we hadn't drafted. Then we do it because we walked, not because we were dragged. His attention warmed my face like a hand would have. You'll call me when Ben needs pancakes. I nodded. He'll stage a syrup coup if I don't. We stood like that for a heartbeat that refused to be reasonable. Then I did the hardest, simplest thing. I closed the suitcase. He walked me to the door, not touching. The house watched. The air smelled like cedar and something I wasn't ready to name. At the threshold, I turned. Hadrian. Yes. You were good, I said, because sometimes kindness is a scalpel. Better than you knew how to be. Thank you. His mouth moved as if the word stay had argued with the inside of his teeth and lost. Ezra. I stepped into the corridor, letting the house become corridor, not cathedral. I'll be back, I said, half promise, half prayer. For what? He asked. For pancakes, I said. And maybe statistics. He huffed out a laugh, unamused and alive. Go then, he said. Before I turn this into a Greek tragedy after all. I went. In the car, the city slid around me like a river, remembering its job. I pressed my palm to my chest, and felt a heartbeat that finally belonged to me, not to the schedule, not to fear, not to a contract that had done its work and expired with grace. I looked at the ring in my pocket and didn't put it back on, not yet. At a red light, the truth settled, where breath goes. I said it out loud, quiet enough that only I heard it. Now I know my price. And yours. The house smelled different in the mornings now. Not wax, not cedar, not centuries of old money embalmed in oak. Coffee. Toast. Something alive. It shocked the portraits, I'm sure. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and found Hadrian already there, sleeves rolled, hair not yet combed into submission. He stood by the French press like it was a ritual, pouring slowly, the steam curling into his face. You're domesticating, I said, sliding onto a stool. Next thing you know, you'll be whistling while you mop. He poured a mug, handed it to me. Whistling is inefficient. I blew on the coffee, grinned over the rim. Fine. But now that we've abandoned contracts, can I at least be upgraded in title? Husband, maybe. Without the itemized receipts. His mouth twitched, that rare, careful smile that lived on the edge of his restraint. Not husband. He set his own mug down, looked straight at me. My choice. Heat climbed my face in a way coffee couldn't excuse. You really need to work on your pep talks. That almost sounded like romance. It was. Before I could decide whether to laugh or kiss him, footsteps pounded down the hall. Ben burst into the kitchen, hoodie askew, grin wide. He looked better. Color in his cheeks, spark in his eyes. This place has waffles on demand. Do you realize that? Waffles. On demand? I told you, I said. He runs a tight ship, all sails, no mutiny. Ben grabbed a plate, already piling it high. He glanced around, fork in hand. You know what's weird? Define weird, I said. This house. He waved the fork at the walls, the cabinets, the sunlight angling in through the big windows. It used to feel like a museum, now it feels alive. Like people actually live here. I exchanged a glance with Hadrian over my coffee. He didn't speak, but the faint softening of his face said enough. Ben stuffed a waffle bite into his mouth and mumbled, I could get used to this. Don't, I said quickly. You're not moving in. You'll corrupt the silverware. He laughed, the sound bouncing against the walls like it belonged here. Later, when he'd wandered off to find syrup reinforcements, I leaned back in my chair and let the warmth of the kitchen settle in my chest. The air smelled of coffee and butter, not duty. The silence wasn't silence anymore, it was comfort. I looked at Hadrian, who looked at me like I was still surprising him. Who would have thought, I said, a contract couple turning into an actual couple? We should have printed a warning on the fine print. His brow lifted. Warning? Side effects may include, I said, deadpan, happiness. He didn't laugh. He just reached across the table, curled his fingers over mine, and held on like it was the most natural clause we'd ever signed.